All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the joint meeting of Assembly Ways and Means and Senate Finance. It is a beautiful sunny Friday. We are happy to be here to get this work done. So with that, Madam Secretary, if you could please call the roll.
Senator Brooks,
Here.
Senator Cannizzaro,
Here.
Senator Dennis,
Here.
Senator Dondero Loop,
Here.
Senator Gokachia,
Here.
Senator Hammond,
Here.
Senator Kiekefer,
Here.
Senator Ratty,
Here.
Senator Severs-Gansert,
Here.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson,
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson,
Here.
Assemblywoman Gorlow,
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen,
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdegi,
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt,
Here.
Assemblywoman Miller,
Here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno,
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters,
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts,
Here.
Assemblywoman Titus,
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles,
Here.
Assemblyman Watts,
Here.
and Chair Carlton.
And I am here. Thank you very much. We can go ahead and proceed. Our first budget today is 101-1005, the Governor's Office of High-Level Nuclear Waste. If I could go ahead and have the appropriate person queued up, please, if you just give us a overview, and then we do have some questions. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Fred Dilger, Executive Director of the Agency for Nuclear Projects. The agency is part of the Governor's Office. We also provide staff support to the 7-member Nevada Commission on Nuclear Projects. Before we discuss the agency budget request, I'd like to provide an overview of the Yucca Mountain licensing proceeding before the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC. Our major task in the upcoming biennium is preparing for this licensing proceeding, and we work closely on this task with the Office of the Attorney General. I'm going to go and share my screen here because I have a PowerPoint. And we're trying to get the, okay. So what exists today at Yucca Mountain is only a 5-mile exploratory tunnel that cannot be used for waste storage or disposal. Congress has not appropriated any funds to the U.S. Department of Energy for the Yucca Mountain project since the fiscal year 2011. This slide shows that DOE would face many challenges should it decide to restart the license application. In 2008, the Department of Energy submitted the Yucca Mountain license application and final supplemental EIS to the NRC. This slide summarizes DOE's proposed action.
Mr. Dilger,
Yes.
This is broadcast. I apologize. Can you share it does not look like we're getting the share screen.
Okay.
So if you could go down to the green button.
I have done that.
And then it looks like if you could just select the PowerPoint, perhaps.
It's not giving me the share option here. I'm clicking on the share screen. It's highlighting the screen I want to appear.
Okay, go ahead and click on that screen.
Well, it's giving me that option, but it just blues out it just gives me a blue box around my screen because of a dual screen setup.
Does it give you an option for just the PowerPoint?
Let me try it again.
No problem.
There we go.
How about now?
Now we can see it. And
All
if
right.
you just want to hit from beginning on that slideshow, we're all set. Thank you.
We had done that before. Okay, so what exists today at Yucca Mountain is only a 5-mile exploratory tunnel that cannot be used for waste storage or disposal. Congress has not appropriated any funds to the U.S. Department of Energy, the DOE, for Yucca Mountain project since 2011. and DOE would face many obstacles should it begin a restart. In 2008, the DOE submitted the Yucca Mountain license application and the final supplemental environmental impact statement to the NRC. This slide summarizes DOE's proposed action disposing 70,000 metric tons of high-level nuclear waste as required by statute, and DOE's plan to expand capacity to 150,000 metric tons. Over the first 50 years, there would be between 5,000 and 12,000 waste shipments. Over 100 years, up to 26,000 waste packages would be moved into underground tunnels called drifts. Then the repository is supposed to prevent groundwater contamination for 1 million years. The estimated total cost in current dollars is $120 billion, including $18 billion that's already been spent. The NRC licensing proceeding has been suspended for lack of funds in 2011. It was restarted in 2013 by a court order that directed NRC to spend all of their remaining funds, even if there isn't enough money to complete licensing. NRC currently has insufficient funds for the next phase, which are trial-like hearings. That's what we're getting ready for. The Biden administration opposes the Yucca Mountain project. The opposition was reaffirmed by Secretary of Energy Granholm in her confirmation hearing. Nevertheless, support for Yucca Mountain in Congress remains strong. If the license proceeding is funded, Nevada will forcefully adjudicate all 218 admitted contentions. These are challenges to the license application, and submit 30 to 50 new contentions. We expect the proceeding will last 5 years and cost DOE and NRC $2 billion. And we plan to defeat the license on the facts. The basic problem is that Yucca Mountain is an unsuitable site for a geologic repository because of its geology and hydrology. Fractured rock above and below the repository horizon will allow highly corrosive, oxidizing groundwater to transport radioactive material from the waste packages into the water table that flows into Amargosa Valley. The Yucca Mountain design relies on engineered barriers, not the rock. So we're burying it in a mountain, but we need barriers over the waste packages to prevent them from failing. These barriers are primarily titanium drip shields that are needed to overcome the deficiencies in the geology and hydrology. Without these drip shields properly installed and functioning perfectly, the repository does not work. Almost as much titanium as nuclear waste will have to be put into the mountain. If constructed, Yucca Mountain would be the world's largest store of aircraft-grade titanium. The license application asserts that 90 years after operations begin, drip shields will be robotically installed over up to 26,000 waste packages, one over each waste package as shown in the slide. Each drip shield is 19 feet long, almost 10 feet tall, and weighs over 10,000 pounds. Installation would need to be done robotically because of the intense radiation. The package surface dose rates of over 1,000 rem an hour, and high temperatures, 120 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit in the drifts. The cost would be $9 billion to $22 billion in current year dollars. And so it raised the question, will future Congresses decide to be willing to fund that? New questions have emerged recently over groundwater impacts. We've prepared 30 new contentions challenging the NRC staff reports on repository safety and groundwater impacts that were published in 2015 and 2016. We focus on groundwater contamination in Amargosa Valley, including flow paths that could affect Death Valley, the Timbisha-Shoshone Reservation lands, and natural hot springs important to the Shoshone and Paiute people. At the direction of the governor, prompted by the 2019 Ridgecrest earthquake, we've begun a project with University of Nevada, Reno to examine the seismicity in the region. The primary concern is the effect earthquakes would have on the surface facilities at the base of the mountain and the increased costs necessary to make these facilities proof against severe earthquakes. The key issue in the licensing proceeding is whether or not the repository can prevent radioactive contamination of groundwater for 1 million years. The EPA Environmental Protection Agency adopted a two-part radiation protection standard for Yucca Mountain that allows a 600% increase in doses from groundwater contamination after 10,000 years. NRC staff calculated that even if the drip shields were to be installed and work perfectly, some off-site contamination resulting in increased individual radiological doses would occur in Amargosa Valley during the compliance period. Nevada's calculations show that without drip shields, the 10,000-year standard, 15 millirem a year, could be exceeded in less than 900 years, and the million-year standard, 100 millirem per year, could be exceeded in 2,000 years. The two-part EPA radiation standard rejected the guidance of the National Academy of Sciences, contradicting the statute that requires the standard be based on these recommendations. So we're challenging that also in court. We have 16 licensing contentions that challenge every aspect of DOE's transportation plan. This slide shows the shipping routes to Nevada that were part of the current license application. About half the country's population lives in the 982 counties along these routes. The shipments would create four kinds of radiological hazards: routine exposures to the public, routine exposures to workers, radiation exposure and/or release of radioactive material following severe accidents, and terrorist attacks or sabotage. Gas vulnerability in severe accidents like the 2001 Baltimore Tunnel Fire and the 2007 MacArthur Maze Fire in California is an unresolved technical debate. The casks are vulnerable to attacks using military explosives. DOE acknowledges that a release of radioactive material in an urban area following an accident or attack cost $10 billion in cleanup costs and economic losses. Our studies using DOE's own computer models show the costs were probably much higher. Up to 85% of the shipments to Yucca Mountain could directly affect Las Vegas. 2 truck shipments every week using the Beltway, and 1 dedicated train shipment every month through downtown for 50 years. If DOE changes routes to avoid Chicago, which is likely, the number of nuclear waste trains through Las Vegas could go up to 100 per year. More than 10% of Clark County residents live within the pink shaded area shown in this slide, 1/2 mile on each side of these shipping routes. This is what the DOE correctly calls the radiological region of influence. This zone would also require special preparation to prevent accidents and plan appropriate emergency response. Under certain circumstances, traffic gridlock, close proximity regular stop locations, and transport near crowds at special events, routine radiation can have health impacts. Credible studies have also shown social impacts resulting from stigma and perceived risk, including reduced property values, unfavorable business location decisions, and adverse impacts on tourism. This last slide shows the Las Vegas Strip where the Fashion Show Drive crosses the railroad tracks. Dozens of major hotels and casinos are located within 1/2 mile region of influence for routine radiation, all along the rail route through downtown. Additionally, that rail route runs about 32 miles between Arden and Apex, impacting about 32 square miles of the Las Vegas metropolitan area. I want to highlight one last issue that this agency has become involved with, and that is plutonium. In June, Nevada sued the Department of Energy on November 30th, 2018 to request a preliminary injunction to stop shipments of plutonium to the Nevada National Security Site. Unknown to Nevada, DOE used this good faith discussion to begin trucking plutonium to the Nevada National Security Site. In the middle of the talks, DOE trucked this 1/2 ton of weapons-grade plutonium near the Las Vegas metropolitan area without warning state officials or emergency responders. DOE continued this activity through the district court's preliminary injunction hearing by pretending that the shipments had not yet occurred, and DOE did not disclose the shipments to Nevada or the district court until January 30, 2019, the same day the district court denied the preliminary injunction. In June 2020, the state of Nevada and DOE reached a settlement agreement committing DOE to remove the 1/2 ton of plutonium from the device assembly facility at the NNSS beginning in 2021, with full removal to be completed by December 31st, 2026. The new Secretary of Energy stated during her confirmation hearings that the Biden administration was complying with and would continue to comply with the terms of the agreement. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions related to this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So with that, committee members, I know there are some questions. Senator Brooks, I know you had a couple questions.
Thank you, Chair Carlton, and thank you, Director Dilger, for coming here this morning and updating us on this issue. My main questions are around the budget, because you did a great job of talking about what we currently have going on and what you've been doing. Have the budget reductions that we approved in the last session, there we go, I'm sorry, my video went off. Have the budget reductions we approved in the last session impacted your ability to perform its duties?
Our legal team and contractors have taken a voluntary reduction. And so as a result of their willingness to work with us, it has not had a material effect on our work.
Appreciate that. And you know, we're in a good place right now, but we've said that several times over the last 40 years or 30, 40 years. If the federal government were to accelerate its agenda, and could you anticipate having to need more resources in this next biennium?
If the Yucca Mountain license were to be funded, yes, we would need more resources. If we see an opening to achieve a dismissal of the Yucca Mountain license, which is also something that we have considered carefully, then we might need more resources. But it would be far, far less than if the proceeding were to go forward.
Thank you, Director. I appreciate that.
There we are. So with that, I believe I have a question from Mr. Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But I have three questions, if you'll indulge me, because this is in my backyard, and so I do have some concerns and some questions on it. The first question, just directly related to the budget, in regards to if the feds are to move forward with the studying and the processing of the licensing, would the state see substantial funds from that?
The way it has worked in the past, should licensing occur, we will receive some money to offset the costs of some of the litigation. Some of the counties and other parties to the lawsuit may also receive some small funds. It will not offset the total cost, but it will offset some of the cost, is my understanding. If the repository were to go forward, is there huge economic benefit for the state of Nevada? No, there is not. There's never been a credible expression of what amount might be, and certainly there are no plans to do any of the fabrication for casks, shields, or any of those other kinds of items associated with the project in the state of Nevada. So I think we're getting the trash and none of the benefit.
But they would be subject to PILT, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so there would be some benefit there. And then the other question in regards to the transportation. It is my understanding that I believe in your presentation you said 85% of it was going to be transported through Las Vegas.
Up to, yes.
Everything that I've seen and the proposals that have come out of at least through Nye County is that somewhere between 90 and 100% was going to bypass Las Vegas with the construction of a railroad from Brim to the site. Has that changed in the last 2 years?
That is a proposal by Nye County. That is not the proposal of the DOE. The DOE's proposal is to construct a railroad from Caliente across 308 miles across the middle of Nevada, and then turn south near Tonopah and then take it down to the test site from the north. I know that the Nye County people advocated for a route connecting Hawthorne to Prim, but that's not something the DOE opted to do.
So the stuff coming from the East Coast would go through Caliente, and it would be the concern would be then from the West Coast transportation that would possibly be going through Las Vegas.
Well, it depends because because of the way the railroads work, it's not that cut and dry. Because if the waste avoids the Proviso rail yard in Chicago, which we think is very likely, then it will go to one of the Union Pacific's critical hubs in the center of the country. And this is something that the railroads are very loath to do. They really don't want to move this waste. They've sued for decades to try to prevent having to move it. And the courts found that yes, they did have to move it. However, they will be able to move it under their conditions because of the way railroads operate. So it's entirely possible that the Union Pacific would move that waste to go south, avoiding some of their critical infrastructure like the Red X in a stretch of railroad in Nebraska. And that would bring it from the south up to through Las Vegas to Caliente.
Thank you for that. And then, Madam Chair, I just have one last question, and I greatly appreciate the time this morning. Director, I'm sure you're aware of how nuclear waste is currently being disposed of on the test site adjacent to Yucca Mountain. And for the members that don't know, basically what's currently occurring is there are shallow trenches that are being dug, and the nuclear waste is being put in barrels and containers and buried. And this is occurring test site.
Mr. Hafen, you're getting away from a question. This isn't about statements. So,
But I'm just leading into my question, Madam Chair.
well, then let's ask the question.
My question is in the studying of the water, because obviously the water is a very big issue. Are you guys also monitoring what's currently potentially leaving the test site and in comparison to what the projections from the Yucca Mountain site would be?
We don't have a program we watch carefully what happens at the NNSS all the time. And are part of the NNSS stakeholder, low-level waste transportation stakeholder forum. And we participate in that all the time. We do not have a drilling program to watch what is to monitor what happens there. However, NDEP and their Department of Federal Facilities watches those folks very carefully. It's important to point out that the low-level defense waste stored at the NNSS has a totally different, completely different radiological hazard from what we're talking about with spent nuclear fuel. The hazard is just 10,000 times different, orders of magnitude more hazardous spent fuel. The low-level waste is something that is, I'm not going to say it's not hazardous, and I'm not, it is definitely hazard and it needs to be controlled carefully. But it's also defense waste, and so we have no angle to prevent its disposal there. We are, however, pushing for an update to the 2013 site-wide programmatic EIS for the NNSS. We think it's time for them to update that and tell us what's going on out there. But at the same time, and what their plans are. But at the same time, we do watch them very, very carefully.
I appreciate that, Director, and thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging me with the questions. I know I had a number of them, so thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure Mr. Dilger will make himself available for any other follow-up
Anytime.
that you need, and staff is always available also. So with that, I have Senator Kickheffer next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Dilger. In your groundwater contamination model, it indicated significant risk out of the state of Nevada and into California. I'm curious about any discussions that the state has had with the state of California over partnering in this fight, how much financial contribution is made by California in fighting this licensing. And we focus a lot on your budget, but they seem to be sharing the potential risk from some of this.
This is something we have coordinated closely with California in the past in terms of budget. They have not participated. However, Inyo County, California, which is one of the affected units of local government, when they were receiving funding, they did extensive groundwater work, very extensive groundwater work, and we have the benefit of all of that. And that has all been incorporated into our own thinking. For what it's worth, the studies that were done that I cited were done by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on behalf of the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy was supposed to do the study and did not. And so the Nuclear Regulatory Commission completed that study. So I'm reporting the results of the NRC's own work.
Thank you for that.
So with that, committee members, I don't believe I have anyone else wishing to be recognized at this time. Any other questions? Seeing no one in the view or in the chat, thank you very much, Mr. Dilger, for being here this morning. It's nice to get an update and know what's going on. We appreciate that. Thank you. Have a great week.
Very much. And we're available for an update anytime at all that you would like.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And if you talk to Senator Bryan, tell him I have a special hello for him.
I will do that.
He is missed. He is desperately missed. So thank you very much. All right. So committee members, our next item is 1030 AG administrative budget account. If we could go ahead and queue up the appropriate person. I have a lot of AG folks listed on my list. So let's just bring them all in and we'll get going.
Good morning, Madam Chair. It's Attorney General Aaron Ford, hoping that everyone can hear me okay. I am here with two of my bosses, Jessica Adair, my Chief of Staff, and Jessica Hoban, my Chief Financial Officer. We are separated appropriately. We have our masks on. As I speak, I'm going to take mine off, however, and we will alternate back and forth. Again, good morning, everybody. I'm Aaron Ford. I'm your Attorney General. I'm pleased today to be here to present our budget to the Joint Committee. We have a slide presentation that we will begin with, if that's okay, and proceed accordingly.
Right. Thank you very much. Is this slide presentation for all of the budgets? Because if it is, we'll stop you intermittently to ask questions on different accounts.
Yes, ma'am. It will address components of the budget that are listed on your agenda, and absolutely you can stop us in between with questions as you see fit.
All right. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we did build in time for questions after each of the budgets that were pulled to be heard today.
Okay, good planning. Thank you very much. Let's proceed.
Thank you. At the outset, let me say again, I am here as the Attorney General, but my two bosses will be speaking to you predominantly around our budget. I would like to, however, introduce you to the office relative to what our priorities are relative to fostering culture in support of what we call our 5 C's. And the budget that you will be presented today absolutely supports and allows us to engage in practice that involves the 5 C's. The 5 C's that guide our office are the protection of constitutional and civil rights, criminal justice and criminal justice reform issues, consumer protection, client service, which includes constituent services, and then community engagement and community service, reminding those in the community that we do more than just put people in jail. A lot of people don't know what the Attorney General Office does. We'd like to remind them that we're your neighbors, that we shop at the Smiths you shop at, that we are the soccer moms and dads as you are. And so we engage in these days virtual community service opportunities and just wanted to present that to you as the areas that we try to focus on through ultimately our hashtag, which is our job is justice. And so these budget items that you will be receiving today help us to perform these in a way that we think is appropriate for the citizenry and the residents of our state. And with that, I'd like to tender the microphone to Jessica Hoban, who is our Chief Financial Officer. And Madam Chair, if I may be excused unless you need me at the end or intermittently, I'm in the middle of a settlement conference right now, actually trying to do some work with the state. And so to the extent I'm needed, I'm happy to come right back in and answer questions, but with your permission, I will excuse myself.
Thank you, Attorney General. That's fine. If anything comes up that we need you back, I'm sure one of the two ladies there will make sure that you appear. So no problem.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Ladies, go ahead and proceed.
Hey, thank you. Good morning, committee members. For the record, my name is Jessica Hoban. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Attorney General's Office. And our first budget that we're presenting today is our administration budget, budget account 1030. We have 4 items that are included in our enhancement requests, enhancement decision units. This is a quick list of what they're related to. One of them is a reclassification. One of them is related to a monthly fleet service vehicle rental that we receive from the Division of Fleet Services. Replacement equipment for some ballistic vests and replacement computers. The first one is enhancement 227. It's reclassification of an administrative services officer. During the 2019 80th legislative session, there was one decision unit which eliminated a budget analyst 3. And in conjunction with that position elimination as a cost savings, we also requested a reclassification of the administrative services 2 officer to be an administrative services officer 3. The intent of that reclassification was to cover some of the responsibilities and duties that would be left lacking from the position that was being eliminated. As a result of the pandemic and the current financial emergency that we entered into during fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021, we agreed to postpone the reclassification as a cost-saving measure so that we could help fill some of the financial shortfalls of the current biennium. So this request is related to the fact that we did not incur these additional costs because we did not proceed with the legislatively approved reclassification of this position in the current biennium. So we are asking for the next biennium to add that back into our budget. The additional cost would be $10,484 in the first year of next biennium and $11,130 in year 2. The next decision unit is related to cost-saving measures to help continue to fill some of the fiscal shortfalls in the next biennium. And that is to relinquish one of the current monthly vehicle leases that we have in this budget. That would result in a cost savings of $3,259 in each year of the next biennium. Our third decision unit, E771, is a request to replace some of the ballistic vests that are assigned to our investigators who reside, the positions reside in this budget account. The governor's recommended budget supports replacing 4 ballistic vests in each year of the next biennium with a total cost of $3,786 each year. So the total biennium would include 4 ballistic vests being purchased. And the final decision unit in this budget is E712. Similarly to the first decision unit that we were discussing, this is related to legislatively approved replacement equipment in the 2020-2021 biennium. We delayed the purchase of the authorized computers in the current biennium as a cost savings measure to help fill the fiscal emergency. And we are asking for a portion of these computers again in next biennium, since we did not purchase them this year. Those are the enhancement units for budget account 1030, and we are happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. That's a good break. So with that, Ms. Howdigy, I believe you had a question on this?
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to go back to the reclassification of the Administrative Services Officer. So I know that we had approved this in 2019, and then it was just postponed for budget saving reasons because of the pandemic. But the ASO, because the other position was eliminated, are they currently doing the work of that eliminated position? So did they assume the responsibilities of that eliminated position?
So Jessica Hoban, for the record, no, they have not. The incumbent in the position right now has not assumed those responsibilities for a few reasons. The first one is the reclassification had not been fully processed prior to the pandemic, the impacts of the pandemic where we were shut down. Secondly, the current incumbent was only hired about 1 month before the pandemic, the impacts of the pandemic came about. So because of the timing of that, along with the fiscal emergency, when we did identify that we could delay the reclassification of this position, we were able to kind of match the responsibilities that the current incumbent is doing with their current position title, and we did not add those additional duties, especially when we knew that postponement would mean that we would be asking them directly to work out of class, and we didn't want that to happen. So we postponed the assignment of those duties.
A follow-up, Madam Chair? Okay, thank you. So then I know the reclassification was due to, we were eliminating a position, we were going to reclassify this employee who was then going to assume the duties of that eliminated position. So who's currently performing the duties of that eliminated position?
For the most part, this is Jessica Hoban, for the record, Chief Financial Officer. There are some components where I am getting assistance from the Administrative Services Officer too, but for the most part, those responsibilities I have to complete those responsibilities.
Okay, and then so the reclassification then would help and alleviate some of those responsibilities from your plate.
Yes, it would.
And with the with the elimination and the reclassification, there would still be a cost savings?
For the record, Jessica Hoban, from a broad perspective, yes, there is still a cost savings because we have already eliminated the budget analyst 3 position. So we're already recognizing those cost savings. I also just wanted to add that along with the approval of this reclassification is my position is responsible for 5 separate functional units in the Attorney General's office. And by taking the additional time to make sure that some of these responsibilities that have not been fulfilled due to the elimination of the budget analyst 3 position and delaying the reclassification of the Administrative Services Officer 2 position, there are a few other functional areas that are not receiving the attention that they need.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That wraps me up.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee members, is there anyone else that has questions on this item at this time? Not seeing anyone wishing to be recognized, we can go ahead and move on to the next item, please.
For the record, Jessica Hoban, Chief Financial Officer with the Office of the Attorney General. Our next item is budget account 1033, which is our workers' compensation fraud budget. This budget contains workers' compensation fraud and also insurance fraud responsibilities. The insurance fraud had approval, the most recent change for the current biennium was the approval of Senate Bill 86 during the 80th legislative session in 2019. And one of our enhancements that we're requesting, our primary enhancement, is related to additional staff in response to the authorization of additional funds, which came through the approval of Senate Bill 86 last session. We also have a training and registration enhancement request. And what you will not see in this presentation, primarily because it's due to standard computer equipment replacement, I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well. I think we've asked for about 4 computers. So our first enhancement is E225. This is staff training. It's related to registration costs and travel for the staff that reside in this budget account. We are asking for $3,500 in year 1 and year 2. For transparency, you'll see that this is highlighted in blue rather than green or red, which you might see throughout our presentation. The reason it's in blue is essentially there is no change in the obligation to this agency. During the agency request budget, we had identified these costs as being incurred in fiscal year 20, which is our base year. And so we had asked for ongoing costs. It was brought to our attention that these particular costs, so although that they did fit within our legislatively approved budget, we had paid them to our travel category, category 3. And we need to correct that and move them into category 4. So we just wanted to bring these costs to your attention and ask for legislative authorization to incur these costs moving forward. And we also are going to place them in the appropriate operating category 4. Our next decision unit is the addition of 7 new positions to support the insurance fraud unit and their activities. We're asking for 3 AG criminal investigators, 2 legal secretaries, and 2 senior deputy attorneys general. Year 1, the request for these positions is to begin in October, so the total costs, including associated operating costs for these 7 positions, is calculated to be $657,053, and in year 2, $825,151. That's the end of our presentation for budget account 1033, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Righty, thank you. And if you could speak up just a little bit, we can pretty much hear you, but it would be better if it's just a touch louder. We'd appreciate that.
Okay, will do.
I have Assemblywoman Tolles first, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thanks for the overview. I'm curious what our backlog is right now and what the timeline is expected for addressing that backlog, considering these 7 new positions. I'm also just kind of curious how workers' comp claims fared during COVID, if there was any change due to a period of unemployment for a lot of folks in terms of reduction in claims.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you, and to Assemblywoman Tolles, Jessica Adair for the record.
Ladies, you can go directly to the members today. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Assemblywoman Tolles. We provided some detailed statistics to LCB prior to this hearing on the caseload data specifically. There are a little over 400 open cases in the insurance fraud unit. Really, with the problem that we are seeing now in that unit is that by statute, insurance companies have to report any suspected fraud to our office. Right now, due to the limited number of staff that we have working on insurance fraud and the sheer number of fraud complaints or reports that we're getting from industry, we're only able to investigate and prosecute about 2% of those cases. And that's not acceptable. And realizing that, the Department of Industry and the Division of Insurance sponsored SB 86 last session in order to rectify that. They doubled the assessments on the insurance industry, and that is the funding that would be used to fund these particular positions. So it's not taxpayer dollars, it's assessments from the insurance industry in order to better get at that backlog. As to the second part of your question on workers' compensation, I don't have statistics in front of me right now. I'm happy to provide those to you at the conclusion of the hearing. I will say anecdotally, we've had some hiccups with the, not hiccups, I guess, sad situations in investigating workers' compensation fraud when our investigators go to investigate a case and they call up the employer, and that employer is no longer in business. We have seen the effects of small businesses closing due to the pandemic and the economic recession trickle all the way down to workers' compensation fraud and affecting our investigations in that way. But I'm happy to get you more detailed statistics on the referrals that we've received.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And definitely those ripple effects of impacts are seen everywhere. I wouldn't have expected that, but that makes sense. Madam Chair, can I ask a few follow-up questions just to get it clarified on the record?
That would be fine. I do have other people in the queue also, so please go ahead and ask another one.
Okay. Just wondering, you're planning on bringing along these new positions in October 1st. And I know that there's probably a anticipated training period that's needed to get them ready to take on those responsibilities. Could you just talk a little bit more about if there's any discussion, particularly when you have such a backlog of 400 open cases and only 2% being investigated currently? Have you talked about maybe bringing on at least one or two of those positions a little bit earlier, say in July, instead of waiting until October? And could they be trained and brought on board sooner?
Thank you, Assemblywoman. We would love to have the opportunity to bring them on board sooner. We used October 1 as the standard date that new positions are allowed to start in a fiscal year after being created during a legislative session. Should this legislature choose to allow us to do that earlier, we would love to do that. We have had those exact conversations internally with our staff who are ready to bring on additional resources. And we've talked about posting those positions prior to October 1 so that we can interview and do background checks. Specifically when it comes to those post-certified peace officers, the background check is extensive. It does take quite some time. So we can have them ready to go and end their PCN by October 1. But again, if the legislature chooses to allow us to take those positions earlier, we would happily accept.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. I have Assemblyman Roberts next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a follow up from Assemblywoman Toll's questions regarding the backlog of insurance fraud cases. And you had mentioned that 2% of the 400 had been investigated. If you could, how many people are in the unit currently? I may have missed it. I apologize.
No, thank you, Assemblyman Jessica Dare, for the record. You didn't miss it. Right now, I believe we have 3 investigators, 2 legal secretaries, and 2.5 DAGs. So we have 1 attorney who splits his time between workers' compensation fraud and insurance fraud. And I would also say it's not so much, well, it is the quantity. We do have quite an extensive number of referrals. The other problem that we're seeing with this and that's contributing to that backlog is the level of sophistication that we're seeing in some of these cases, specifically staged car accidents. Right now, we are currently investigating a case that involves 53 defendants. These stage accidents are very complex. They involve multiple players, but they're also very dangerous for both the people who are involved in setting up these fake car accidents, but individual bystanders who might just be driving down the street at the same time as one of these staged accidents and gets hurt. So that's an additional complication on top of the backlog is just the level of complexity of this particular type of fraud. Can I provide?
Thank you. And if a follow-up, Madam Chair. So, yeah, there's no doubt that these cases, we all pay, right, for insurance fraud, if we're insuring our cars. How many prosecutions have you done on the 2% of the cases?
So for the record, Jessica Hoban, Chief Financial Officer with the Attorney General's Office. I do want to clarify about some of the cases. The 400 cases that we are saying are open are ones that are at various levels and phases of prosecution. The 2% rate that comes into play is when we look at the number of total referrals and recommendations or complaints that we receive in a given time frame. Only 2% of all of the recommendations we get are the ones that actually end up in prosecution.
Okay. So eight cases in the last year.
Assemblyman Roberts, Jessica Dare for the record, I can get you specific numbers of prosecutions. We actually we do an annual report on the number of prosecutions. We put that on our website. I can get that to you. And we also list the cost awarded to the state. And I want to correct my statement earlier. We have 5 investigators currently in insurance fraud, not 3. I was incorrect. So I want to make sure I get that on the record.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the answers. Obviously, they need some help in this area, and I'd be willing to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. So I guess I need to clarify the actual backlog. I'm hearing different numbers, cases in process, 2% of what comes to you actually moves forward. How many cases do you have in the backlog?
For the record, Jessica Hoban, we do have this information. We just have to find it in our documents. If you would like to give us just a moment.
I believe we attached a document entitled Insurance Fraud Combined Stats with Caseload Data from FY 2017 through FY 2020. And I apologize that I cannot find it in the many papers in front of me.
Okay, if you could provide that to us, I just think having that number rather than the percentages, and we understand where you're trying to go. So that's great. So I guess my next question would be, so with this backlog and with these new folks, how are you going to prioritize the cases that you do? Because I know you go after providers. You can even go after other insurance companies that try to defraud the other insurance company. But yet there are probably cases where it's just a small single accident off to the side, or someone mistakenly gets a check, doesn't realize. There's a lot of components to this. So how do you prioritize the cases that these folks will be working on?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Dare for the record. Right now, we are currently, our director of this unit currently uses a few different factors to prioritize those decisions. One is recidivism. Are we seeing the same person over and over again? So that's an important factor. Another factor is the complexity of the fraud. Frankly, do we have the resources to investigate and prosecute this particular case? And another factor is, and that's probably one of the most important factors, is the amount of victim loss. And I think that's exactly what you were getting to in your question is has the loss suffered by a victim significantly impacted their ability to go about their daily life. So those are a few of the factors that we're currently using to make those decisions about how do we prioritize, and I imagine it would continue in that manner.
Okay. Thank you. I think that answers my questions, and I look forward to getting more data from you. We know we're just starting this, so it'll be good to see exactly how these progress.
Thank you.
People are helped.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do, like I said, we present as a part of SB 86. We were required to produce that report on an annual basis. I'm happy to get you the most recent report. And then I think we compiled all of those reports and put it in a document for LCB today. And I apologize that I just can't find it in my folder, but I'll make sure that the committee has that report with you.
Just please send it to the staff, and the staff will make sure that everyone gets the appropriate information. So thank you very much. Committee members, are there any other questions on this particular budget item? Not hearing anyone or seeing anyone, I believe we can move to 1038.
Okay, for the record, Jessica Hoban, Chief Financial Officer with the Office of the Attorney General. The next budget is 1038, which is our consumer advocate account. In this budget account, we have 3 primary initiatives that we are asking that encompass 6 enhancement or decision unit requests. Additional settlement funds to fund 3 staff that are in this budget, a transfer of 2 staff from budget account 1045 into budget account 1038, and equipment replacement. The first initiative is a request to use current settlement funds that are available to replace Morgan Stanley settlements that will be fully depleted. We anticipate in the current state fiscal year 2021 that the Morgan Stanley settlement funds will be fully expended. So the 2 decision units that you're looking at, E490 demonstrates the depletion of the Morgan Stanley funds, which have been funding these positions for the past several years. And decision unit E225 is the request to replace those expiring funds with current settlement funds. There is no additional cost to this budget for this request. It's simply a request for a change in funding source. And the amounts are $412,265 in year 1, $415,514 in year 2. The next initiative is related to transferring 2 positions, which currently reside in our National Settlement Fund budget account 1045. It is for 1 Deputy Attorney General position and 1 legal researcher, and transfer them into budget account 1038. Then our decision unit E500 is requesting a replacement to also use current settlement funds to fund those 2 positions once they were to transfer, if approved, into budget account 1038. The total cost would be $278,464 in year 1, and year 2 would be $280,013. Again, agency-wide, there isn't a difference in impact. It's simply realigning for organizational function and responsibilities and the funding source to cover those positions and their operating costs. The third initiative is related to computer replacement. E712 is similar to our budget account 1030, where we are requesting replacement computers, which were approved during the 2019 80th legislative session. We delayed purchasing these computers as a cost savings measure related to the current fiscal emergency. So we are asking to purchase those computers again in the upcoming biennium. Cost in year 1 would be $18,226, and year 2 would be $16,824. For decision unit E682, this would actually reduce some of the replacement computers that we have requested to purchase as a continued response to the current fiscal emergency and part of a reduction to help fill some of the financial shortfalls of the state. That is the end of our 1038 Consumer Advocate presentation, and we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, wait a minute here. Okay, good. I am unmuted. I remembered this time. All right. So, Ms. Miller, I think you had a question on this one.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. Yes, if you could just explain briefly what the actual responsibilities of the legal researcher and the two proposed senior deputy attorney generals would be. And also, after you explain the role, if you could give us an idea of what the impact would be if the new positions weren't funded.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Jessica Adair, for the record. So these attorneys and legal researcher currently are working in mortgage fraud, as well as other financial fraud issues and consumer protection issues. They are also our liaisons to many of the multi-state investigations and settlements that relate to consumer protection. So that's what they're currently doing in 1045. That's exactly what the folks in 1038 are doing as well. It's both of those budgets are dedicated to consumer protection. So in terms of the second part of your question, what would be the loss? The loss, frankly, to our state would be huge. As this committee knows, this state recoups tens of millions of dollars in settlement funding due to our multi-state investigations and settlements with corporations that defraud Nevadans. And not just that, but many of these settlements also bring restitution and additional protective actions for citizens of Nevada who have been defrauded. So the loss, if we don't have the attorneys and folks that we have currently working on those doing that type of activity in the future, the loss in just dollar amount would be huge. But I think more importantly, the loss in terms of our ability to continue to fight for Nevada's consumers on all sorts of consumer protection issues, from financial fraud, mortgage fraud, data breaches, and identity theft. All of those issues that are so important to Nevadans would be significantly impacted. So I don't think I can underscore the loss enough. So thank you for asking that question and allow me to brag a little bit on our team who works on these issues.
Thank you for your response, Ms. Adair. Follow-up, Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Miller.
One additional question for you. Given the replacement settlement funds, it seems that they would only be sufficient through the end of this biennium. So does the agency have a plan without those funds to continue sustaining these new positions after that biennium or this biennium?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Jessica Adair, for the record. Yes and yes. Yes, those settlement funds are just for this biennium. And frankly, that's been a practice for this particular budget for nearly a decade. So that is not something new to this agency, but we recognize it's a problem. We don't have the ability to sufficiently foresee those settlement dollars. We are currently in conversations with a variety of stakeholders to come up with a more sustainable plan in the future. So thank you for asking that question.
And thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. So with that, committee members, does anyone else have any other questions on this particular item? Not seeing anyone. No one wishing to be recognized. All right, I think we can move on to 1043, the forfeiture account. And whoever's presenting, would you please keep in mind that we have a number of new people on the committee, and this one can be kind of complicated. So there we go. So I want to make sure that everybody understands how it works. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so Jessica Hoban for the record. Budget account 1043 is our forfeiture account. And based on Chair Carlton's request, I will give a brief overview of how this account operates, primarily because our presentation and slideshow on this is very short. So the way that this particular budget works is our investigators sometimes participate in larger investigations, which involve sometimes multiple different states, but many different jurisdictions, and sometimes are related to a federal level crime. when these cases are taken and heard and result in forfeiture of goods, funds, etc., we request additional funds through the federal system to receive a share or a portion of the monies or items that were forfeited as a result of these cases. Based on that, the federal government is in charge of making the decisions of who performed work, what percentage of time and effort may have been involved, because there are multiple law enforcement agencies that do participate in these cases. And as a result, they review participation, they review what was seized in the assets, and the participants who request a portion can receive what the federal government authorizes for their participation. So an example, let's just use $1,000 because that's a round number. If there were 5 different law enforcement agencies that participated in a large case and it resulted in $1,000 being recouped in forfeiture funds, if all 5 agencies participated equally in their time and effort, essentially 20% of the recovered forfeiture funds would then be distributed 20% to each participant. And that is how this budget account receives its funds. We participate in higher level, federal level cases, and funding that is recouped is distributed amongst all of the participants based on their contribution. And so this is not a set or standard source of funding on a regular time frame, nor is it associated with specific dollar amounts as far as projections or ongoing funding is concerned. Do you want to add anything? Okay. All right. So with that, we have one decision unit. And this decision unit was added primarily as a balancing function for this budget. It's not particularly tied to any kind of particular cuts, other than the fact that when we receive the funding in this budget, it gets spent until it's depleted, until we have the benefit and opportunity to receive an additional distribution for a subsequent case. That was the presentation for Budget Account 1043. We're happy to take any questions that you may have.
All right, so I believe Senator Dondero Loop, you had a question? I was checking my list.
Yes, thank you. So with this projected shortfall for FY 2021 and then balancing forward to 2022, in the relationship to the amount recommended in the governor's budget, would you tell me or tell us how the additional expenditure reductions the agency is considering in order to balance that recommended budget for 21-23 biennium?
So thank you for the question, Senator. Jessica Hoban for the record. One item that I forgot to include in the overview is the authorized use of funds for the forfeiture account. It's federal guidance that governs how the funding can be used. It is required to be used to augment activities of law enforcement. So our past expenditures of funds that have received do go primarily towards our investigative staff, either through training or recertification, things like that. Because the intent of the funding is to augment activities of law enforcement, one of the requirements is that we cannot spend any funds that we receive on items that were approved as part of our legislatively approved budget. So in the past, what we have done is when additional funding comes in, we're required to go to, depending on the dollar thresholds, we are required to go to IFC and receive budgetary authorization to receive the funds and expend them according to our plan once the funds have been received. But technically, from the federal guidance, if we do continue planning and budgeting for expenditures on funds that we have not yet received, we're not in compliance with the federal guidance. So essentially, we plan and spend the funds as they come in, and once they're gone, we are not obligated under a legislatively approved budget to spend funds that we no longer have. I hope that helped explain how this works and answer your question.
Follow up, Madam Chair?
See,
So with that, can you tell me about the status of the update of the cases that you all anticipate forfeiture funds might be forthcoming?
Jessica Dare for the record. Unfortunately, we cannot. And that is not because we would not love to give you that information. We just don't have it. The federal government is the ultimate say-so in determining how much and when we receive this money. And because of that, because of all the federal terms and conditions, we do not use this account to fund any one position, any particular activity, anything that we have to rely upon because this money is so unreliable. So like Jessica said, when we get the money, we use it in a way that's federally appropriate and authorized by the legislature through IFC. But because it is so sporadic and we don't get that advance notice that you're asking about, we simply cannot rely upon it for any particular budgetary reason.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Chair.
and thank you, Ms. Dondarello. I guess I'm still a little confused about the shortfall. Am I unmuted? Yes, I am. So it looks like you're going to be using more than what's actually left in the forfeiture fund, or is it Friday and I am misreading this?
So thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hoban for the record. I don't think you're misreading anything. It is fairly confusing. Some of the numbers that you're seeing may be misleading. From the standpoint of the way that our system works to build a budget through the NEBS system, it's based off of baseline budgets. So there were a couple of oversights that the agency had in our agency approved budget where we maybe could have more clearly backed out 100% of the costs in our base year, and that may have led to the numbers you're looking at making a little more sense than what they do right now. But part of the challenge there is the current biennial budget actually did include revenue and cost, and the fiscal year 21 work program year in the system that we use to build our budget actually demonstrated additional revenue and expenditures than what we have, and honestly could not be accommodated through the budget building system itself. Because of the excess that was already built into our legislatively approved budget would exceed even all of the costs that we incurred in our base year. So it was next to impossible to back everything out and make it look negative. One suggestion that I can think of that may help is we are more than happy to prepare a work program. It should be non-IFC because the dollar amount would be under $30,000. But if we prepare that work program that actually aligns our current cash available versus how we plan to spend it. It would go through the process and receive the approvals, and as a result, it may be able to be updated in the budget building system so that you have a better and more clear picture of what this account looks like currently, and then that would then flow into the next biennial period.
Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it. This one does have a number of moving pieces. So if you would work with staff on that, and if we could have some conversations about how we can kind of true this up, because it does look like you're looking for more than is there. You never know for sure how much is going to come in. There's restrictions on how it can be spent. So I just want to try to keep this as straight as possible, knowing all the guidance that's involved in this particular budget. So thank you very much for the explanation. So with that, committee members,
Madam Chair.
Mr. Roberts, yes, I saw you, but I wasn't sure if it was this one or the last one. So go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a quick follow-up on that, and maybe I'm misreading the forms or I don't understand. I'm new to this committee. What's your average on what you receive on the equitable sharing program per year?
So for the record, Jessica Hoban, we have not received any funds in this account for the prior 3 fiscal years.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mr. Roberts. These are complicated, and I want you all to understand how it works. So thank you for the question. Committee members, any other questions at this time? Not seeing anyone or hearing anyone, so I believe we can go ahead and move on to the next item, ladies. That is 10:45. And this is another complicated one, so good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. We'd like the wishes for luck. Jessica Hoban, for the record. This is budget account 1045, National Settlement Administration. This budget account was established with a national settlement related to mortgage fraud. And I believe most of the positions were established in fiscal year 2012. This budget is currently funded 100% with the remaining of that settlement funds that was first placed in this account back in its initiation. And the complication here is when you're funding a budget with a one-shot source, such as a settlement, once those funds are spent, they eventually get to a point where they are being depleted. And that's the complication in this budget that I believe the chair was mentioning or referring to. So we have one decision in this budget. It's E900, and this connects to the presentation we had in budget account 1038. The same decision unit in both budgets. This is the budget where the Deputy Attorney General and the legal researcher currently reside, that are being proposed to be moved under to the consumer advocate budget and budget account 1038. That is the proposed budget where these would be received because it does align with their operational duties and our organizational structure. So to this particular budget account, although from an agency perspective, there is no net change in additional obligation, it would save expenditure of the settlement funds that are being depleted. It would save this budget $278,464 in year 1 and $280,013 in year 2. If this decision unit were approved and these positions did transfer to budget account 1038, it is that other budget account that would then assume the same costs for taking on these staff. That's the presentation that we have for budget account 1045, and we are happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. I believe I have Senator Ratty would like to open it up with questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the overview, and just want to thank the Attorney General's office and the Division of Housing for these important programs, Home Means Nevada and Home Again, particularly as we're heading into another recession. If I'm following what you're doing, it seems to me like you're moving them out of this settlement dollars into another settlement dollars, and it looks like you have the money available to support these positions for 2 years, just in the biennium. So are we just shifting a sustainability problem on this funding source to a sustainability problem on another funding source, or how would we fund these positions after this biennium?
Thank you, Senator Jessica Adair, for the record. You are absolutely correct. The reason we're not just putting some additional settlement dollars into this particular budget account is because after conversations with LCB, GFO, and State Controller, it was determined that this particular account cannot receive any additional settlement dollars beyond the mortgage fraud settlement because it is not set up that way and would require a statutory change. But your larger question and point remains, we are running out of funding for this budget account. We have made significant cuts and like moving those 2 positions out, other cuts in this budget to ensure that all of these positions that are in 1045 will be fully funded through the end of the next biennium. But we are looking down a very difficult problem where we have many employees in our office who provide incredibly important services to the state of Nevada, who, if we do not come with a solution in the next biennium, we're going to have some serious issues. And I know that I sound like a broken record because I spoke about this in the budget hearing in the 2019 session, and I think I've reached out to some of you individually prior to this budget hearing on this account specifically because we are so concerned about it. But we were able for this particular budget cycle to ensure that all of the staff are fully funded for the next biennium. And then, and because of that, we did not make any changes in this particular budget to ensure that that the next budget cycle would be fully funded, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think because this is an important program, can you just talk about what the program impact would be on the loss of these funds if we weren't doing these programs?
Absolutely. So this program essentially has 3 different functions. One of those functions is the attorney and the legal researcher who are working on mortgage fraud issues, consumer protection issues, and multi-state settlements. That work will continue when you're transferred to the 1038 budget if that is so approved in this budget cycle. The other 2 functions, though, remain in 1045, and those are absolutely critical. There is one of those functions is the receiving, investigating, and prosecuting of complaints related to financial fraud and elder abuse. So we have many positions in our office, from administrative aides who work in our constituent services unit, who receive complaints about scams, fraud, elder abuse, all sorts of consumer protection issues, who work directly with constituents when they file complaints with our office. I will say that the consumer protection issues is the #1 source of complaints in our office. And as you can imagine, COVID has only made that more difficult. We also have investigators who are dedicated to investigating crimes involving financial fraud and scams and elder abuse. And then we have prosecutors dedicated to prosecuting those crimes. Our office is the #1 leader in the state when it comes to financial fraud. So local law enforcement agencies rely upon referring those cases to us. And as you can imagine, it is a huge workload. And then the final piece to this puzzle is actually not any employee in our office, and that is a sub-granting program to a variety of legal aid partners and other vendors who work on consumer education and assistance with individual consumers through pro bono legal work on consumer protection issues and elder abuse and guardianship fraud. So one of the things that you did not see in this presentation, because it wasn't a decision unit, it's in the base budget, was a cut to those sub-grantees and the amount of money that they received to the Attorney General's office to work on those issues. And it's going to be difficult but it was part of a decision that we made in order to continue what we could for this next biennium, because as you mentioned, these issues are just too important for us to end those functions. I know I rambled on quite a bit, but this is a large budget that employs many people and does many different things.
No, I think it's incredibly important to put a very fine point on what you just said. We've basically been using these mortgage settlement funds appropriately to be the backbone of our consumer protection for vulnerable populations, elder fraud, mortgage, folks who are at risk of losing their house, the whole legal aid infrastructure, not the whole legal aid infrastructure, but a significant chunk of infrastructure for our legal aid partners. And when they go away, that's going to be a very big gap in our consumer protection social services framework. You intrigued me on the cut to legal aid. And so you're saying it doesn't show up. Is that because that gets treated as a one-time appropriation and so therefore just isn't even in the base budget?
Thank you, Senator Jessica Adair, for the record. So that is how the governor's recommended budget was formulated, is that it was going to be a permanent cut moved into base. So it wasn't considered a decision unit. And that is why it wasn't in the presentation, but it was, if you look at our line by line budget in the governor's recommended budget, that information is there. And we've been talking to our legal aid partners for over a year in anticipation of these decisions. But that's why it's not included in the presentation. We're not trying to hide it, but it just, because of the formulation of the decision units, it didn't appear as a decision unit.
I appreciate that. And maybe staff can help me. I'm still learning to read the full budgets. So maybe staff could help me find that line item and we can get on the record what that cut will be. And then, so apart from general fund appropriations, which we all know are a challenge right now, what have you done to explore alternative funding sources for some of this important work?
So I have an expert here next to me who can actually answer your previous question more appropriately. So I will let her take over on that. But in terms of what are our plans? So we're talking with our legal aid partners. We're talking with other folks in the community. We've been talking to GFO, LCP, members of the committee about this for quite some time. We're open to ideas. We have some ideas that we look forward to working with you in the future to ensure that we are sustainably funding this budget. We did consider whether we should ask for general funds to supplement these positions, but since we have the money now, we felt that was inappropriate at this particular time. So we're open to working with you. We do have some ideas. I will actually let Jessica Hoban supplement my answer about the decision unit, though.
So for the record, Jessica Hoban, when Jessica Adair was talking about our base budget being adjusted, that was primarily related to the requirement to balance the budget. And we have to balance it at the base and adjusted base levels. So the reason why you didn't see the cut to the partners on the slide presentation, like Jessica Adair said, is because it was kind of rolled into our base budget. Looking at it from a more broad perspective, we did intend on continuing funding as close as we possibly could to the current levels to each of our nonprofit partners. We wanted to keep that same level for at least the first year of the biennium, but due to the constrictions on the various different decision units and base budgets and enhancement requests that come along, we had to cut the funding to those organizations in our base budget, with our intent being, if the additional decision units that we have requested do move forward and are approved, The cost savings that we realized for those decision units are fully intended to go back and augment the cuts that were given to those partner organizations. So even though our base budget had to cut their funding, our intent is any cost savings that we find through this legislative process and our approved budget and for the next biennium will go back to those partner organizations so that the cut is not as severe on their end.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation. Do you know the dollar amount?
The dollar amount of if I could ask you, Senator, with the dollar amount of the cut or the dollar amount of the cost savings?
The sub-grant that we are cutting to the legal aid agencies on the piece that's not really showing up in our presentation on the legal aid cuts.
I don't know if I have that in front of me right now. Oh, we do. We do have it. I just have to find it. I can't find it, but we do. We do have it, and we can provide it. We just aren't able to locate the numbers right now. It's right there. Oh, yes. We have interpret this for me. Yes. Just quick dollar amounts. So we cut each sub-grantee depending on their previous awards. So it would be more equal. Overall, an additional cut that was made to these partner organizations in order to balance our base budget is approximately $250,000 total. We didn't want to take the full amount from one partner organization over another, so we did kind of allocate across so that it wasn't as large a hit to one particular partner. But if you need additional detail, we can provide a list of each partner and the amounts to staff.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I don't mean to second guess the number. I know we're putting you on the spot a little bit here, but if you could work with staff, my recollection from these conversations from last session was that the number was significantly higher than that, and so maybe I'm thinking of another number. But if we could dig into that with staff, I'd appreciate that information. And then, Madam Chair, that was a lot of discussion, so I appreciate the time and would just request that we keep an eye on this. It doesn't feel like it's going to show up in a decision unit anywhere, but maybe we get lucky and get some federal funds or something along those lines that could apply to this. I think it's an important service we provide to Nevadans. Thank you.
And thank you, Senator. And I totally agree. Being around when this fund came into existence, the National Settlement Fund, all the changes and gyrations that it has made, setting up the foreclosure mediation program, which I believe is very valuable, especially right now. In my daytime job, I am trying to negotiate with mortgage lenders to keep folks in their homes right now. This is a problem that is not going to get smaller in the next year. It's going to get bigger in the next year. And we have to have the consumer protection for folks to be able to go to. If I wasn't able to pick up the phone and call legal aid or one of the other folks that I can get advice from to help these folks that come to the nonprofit agencies for assistance, I'm not sure what other options they would have. So I believe it's very important that we make sure that there isn't a consumer protection cliff in this mortgage settlement area. We know banks will only wait so long, and we know this recovery is going to be long. So I look forward to working with you ladies and with staff to see what we can do to try to address this issue. The one thing that we really didn't discuss too much was the 21 positions. I think you glanced on it a little bit, but you're going to have those 21 positions for a bit longer. But what is the plan going forward with those 21 positions? And we know when we get settlements, we have a job to do for 5 years. We hire the folks. They're all well aware, but we also know there's still a problem out there. So if you could elaborate on those 21 positions, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your words about the importance of this program. It is at the heart of what we do in the AG's office. It's very important to the Attorney General, and we know that the service that we are providing and the service that the legal aids are providing on this issue is just, it couldn't be more important, and it couldn't be more important right now. So I really appreciate that. In terms of those 21 positions, that gets to that bucket of the folks who work in our offices, whether they're constituent services staff, investigators, or prosecutors, who receive complaints on financial fraud and scams and elder abuse, investigate those complaints, and prosecute any criminal matters. And then the two positions that are currently the Senior Deputy Attorney General and the legal researcher that we're proposing to move to 1038. I'm happy to get into any more detail that you would like me to, or answer any specific questions about those positions, but those are those positions, and the folks who work in constituent services, investigations, and prosecutions on financial fraud and guardianship issues.
And thank you very much. I appreciate that answer. Earlier in your testimony in one of the other budgets, you had mentioned that there's a lot of other settlements in the works right now, and I think that's actually where the Attorney General is right now. So apart from general fund appropriations, what are your plans and what have you explored to be able to maintain some of these very important positions that do a really good service to our constituents?
Thank you, Chair. We are open to anything. So one of the reasons we haven't supplemented this budget with more settlement funding that is unrelated to the mortgage fraud settlement is just because we are limited by statute to not add any additional settlement dollars or any other dollars. However, we've been talking, as I think Senator Ratty was alluding to, we've been speaking to stakeholders, GFO, LCB, members of this committee, anyone who is willing to take my phone call about this issue. I am all ears to figure out how we more sustainably fund these positions and the legal aid organizations that work on this issue. I know that many of them are very interested in this budget hearing and what comes out of it, and I'm happy to brainstorm with you. So I think there was a mention earlier about federal dollars. Again, because this budget account doesn't accept federal dollars or any other dollars, we haven't used federal dollars in this budget account. If there was a way that we could accept federal dollars, or, I think if there was a grant program that might be appropriate for this, we would be more than happy to look into that, make sure that we could apply and ensure that we were able to bring in different kinds of funding to work on these issues.
All right. I think one of your statements piqued another question from Senator Ratty. So we usually don't do this, but it's an important issue. So Senator Ratty, you had a quick follow-up on this?
My apologies. Just a quick clarification. Is the statute that's preventing us from directing any other funding into this account NRS, something we can change?
Thank you, Senator Jessica Day, for the record. I believe so, and this has been the subject of a spirited debate between the LCB, GFO, state, and the state controller. So I am happy to work with your staff to see if we can figure out how we make a statutory change. I believe it was the statute that created this budget account that limited the sources of funding to just that mortgage fraud settlement.
Thank you.
And Ms. Adair, if I could follow up though, but I believe the statute was created because the way the settlement agreement was signed off on, the money could only be spent in this way. So we made sure by statute that the money only got spent this way. I think you need to track it back one more decision point. And I may be wrong. It's been a long time since we've had this conversation, but that was my recollection.
Yes, Madam Chair. And I think what we would like to figure out is by statute, it's so long as the additional funds are used for the state purpose, would it be acceptable under NRS? But I think, Madam Chair, you're getting exactly to the reasoning why they set up the statute that way.
Thank you. It was an accountability measure to make sure that it didn't become something it was never intended to be. And it also sent a message in the settlement agreement that we were taking this seriously and we were going to use the monies in an appropriate way. So we didn't open ourselves up for criticism on using the money to just backfill any budget that we wanted to. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I believe that takes care. Was there any other questions? Please speak up. It's hard to keep up with the chat requests sometimes. Seeing none, hearing none, I believe our last conversation this morning with you ladies, and you've done an excellent job, thank you so much, is budget item 1047.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jessica Hoban. This is our final budget that is on the agenda today is budget account 1047, which is AG state settlements. This budget account funds one position. This also received settlement funding to establish the one position and also use the settlement funds to fulfill a few other initiatives primarily related to the opioid situation that we have and try to curtail some of the impacts of the opioid crisis. When this budget account first received the settlement dollars, the one position that is in this budget account was established through a work program request that went to IFC during an interim. It's our understanding that the legislative body requested that even though this position was authorized through the work program, that it come to you again for consideration as part of a biennial budget request. So this decision unit is specifically created to meet that request of the legislature when the position was created. Essentially, there would be no fiscal impact to this budget as we have been incurring costs for this position over the previous biennium. So there is no additional cost in this request. It's simply allowing the opportunity for additional discussion and conversation related to this position to determine, if approved, whether or not it would continue. The amount of this position and its associated operating costs represents $117,280 in year one and $117,986 in year two. That is our presentation on the budget enhancement request for budget account 1047, and we're happy to take any questions you may have.
I apologize, I was muted. Senator Dennis, you.
Sure. Yeah, I want to ask, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. I wanted to ask about the criminal investigator position and the healthcare fraud task force. Can you provide an update on their activities and accomplishments? And also talk a little bit about the state's effort to combat the opioid crisis.
Thank you, Senator. Jessica Adair for the record. This is a post-certified sworn peace officer who is working with the Healthcare Fraud Task Force, primarily based in Northern Nevada. They do a great deal of work on prescription and illicit prescription drugs such as opioids. This investigator has been working hand in hand with many of the investigations that occur with HIDA and up in Northern Nevada with the I-80 corridor that we do see as a significant opioid trafficking route. More broadly, our office has been working a great deal with this investigator and with many of our other investigators and our other positions in the office on opioid abuse. For example, one of the federal grants that we applied and received was, it is called OD MAP, So we have a position that's a joint position with the Department of Health and Human Services that works with every law enforcement agency, at least one law enforcement agency in every county in the state, to map and track opioid spikes. So when we can see it's a database system where law enforcement agencies can input when they attend to an opioid overdose. When you see a number of overdoses occurring in one small area, that is identified as a spike. And then law enforcement and other public service agencies go into a previously developed protocol. And that protocol would be developed through tabletop exercises and best practices through the federal grant to ensure that they locate the source of the spike and are also taking some other prophylactic measures to address the spike in that area. I know that's not specifically to this investigator, but I wanted to answer your question about what we're doing more broadly to address the opioid epidemic. And then, of course, the litigation to ensure that the reasons and contributors to the opioid crisis are held accountable in the state, and that families that have been affected by the crisis get justice, and frankly, our state that has spent an untold amount of money and time and resources are held accountable.
Thank you. So you're using Volkswagen settlement funds for this position, right? For a 5-year period. Are you guys intending to make this a permanent position after that 2023?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, and actually the settlement funds, the Volkswagen funds being used for this purpose was under the previous administration, and it was part of a larger package of opioid related initiatives that they funded through this Volkswagen settlement. We don't have any intention of ending this position. It's a very important position, and frankly, this work could not be more critical. We're just seeing a rising rate of opioid deaths here at the state. Though I think, looking forward into future bienniums, are interested in figuring out a better way to fund this position so it isn't reliant upon a settlement agreement that was not necessarily connected to the opioid epidemic.
Yeah, so you anticipated my next question, which was how are you going to fund it after 2023? Sounds like from what you just said, it sounds like you're looking at that, but you don't have any permanent solutions at this point?
Thank you, Senator Jessica Dare, for the record. Not at this point. We're trying to get through this budget cycle first, but as we know, we've got quite a few positions in this office that we need to figure out a better, more sustainable funding plan, and this is one of them.
Yeah, seems like we definitely have talked a lot about a lot of those, trying to figure out how we're going to continue those. Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. I believe Ms. Tolles, did you have a question? And then I'll go to Dr. Titus afterwards.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I have particular interest in this topic and use of funds relating to this topic and where we go from here. So I know that there's actively that we're hoping that there's going to be some more settlement funds in regards to the opioid crisis. Could you speak to what we anticipate we might be seeing in the future? Are there other outstanding settlement funds that we think may be coming in this next biennium?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Jessica Dare, for the record. I am not at liberty to, on the record, discuss what we anticipate from the opioid litigation. I will say, though, that if the amount, whether we receive it through trial or settlement, should be commensurate with the loss that this state has endured, which is extremely great. I do think, however, and it's my personal opinion, it's the opinion of the Attorney General, and I think that we share this opinion with you, that those funds should be dedicated to abatement and ensuring that those funds are not used for another purpose that is unrelated to the opioid epidemic. I will say that The previous complaint that was only filed against Purdue Pharma and did not include executives of Purdue Pharma or 50 other defendants who we believe contributed to the opioid epidemic would have resulted in a significantly smaller amount of money received by the state of Nevada because we have seriously expanded that complaint to include some of the largest corporations in the world. I think we are we're in a better position. And additionally, Nevada's laws that address co-conspirator conduct are very strong. And so we are in a unique position in this state, not just because we were uniquely impacted. If you look at the per capita number of deaths, of opioid deaths across the country, Nevada was uniquely impacted, more disproportionately impacted for opioid deaths. But we have a unique position in that our laws are very favorable to the state in terms of this litigation. I don't want to give you a number and then be wrong. And I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, and I also don't want to undershoot. So as you know, if we get more information on that, of course, you all will be the first to know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know we're going to have more conversations about this soon. And so I do share that common goal of making sure that those funds are used towards treatment and prevention. And I look forward to continuing to discuss options moving forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Assemblywoman Tolles. So with that, I believe I have Dr. Titus next.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask you a question. Thank you for the Attorney General's office for your presentation and comments about the opioid addiction and the crisis we have. As we all know, we've seen an increased episode of overdoses during this pandemic for a number of reasons, but it's still out there and still a crisis here in our state and throughout our nation. And I'm very pleased that there's investigation going on when you see that spike in opioid overdoses. That means there's been an exceptionally bad batch of something out there, and getting on that really quickly so we can limit that exposure to our citizens, I think it is critical. So I appreciate that. My question is along the settlement funds for the opiates, and I understand that we haven't really sorted all that out yet, but the process of where those funds will go once we do get more of these funds. And I appreciate that you come back to us as a body and let us know what's happening, because hopefully it goes some into some of these mobile crisis units, perhaps overdose addiction treatment, all of those. So I just will be interested to see what the plans are as you get these funds. How will they be distributed, and how we can be involved with that. Along the same line, my question is, what are your plans for those, if you have any plans, and can you share those yet? And the number two thing was, I'm also interested in some of these other fines that you have along the pandemic, and we're not seeing that today, but perhaps on another time you could let us know where the OSHA fines are going, what you use those for, all these along that pandemic. So at some point, if we could get some information on where those fines are going and what you're planning to do with the opioid fine settlements, I would appreciate it. So thank you. And if you're prepared to answer any of that now or can follow up with that, that'd be fine.
Thank you, Jessica Dare, for the record. I can answer some of those questions. In terms of the OSHA fines, I really cannot speak to those particular fines. That is handled by OSHA, and those fines do not come to the Attorney General's office. So I wish I could provide you information, but it's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. In terms of the funding for any opioid-related litigation, part of that will depend on how we would receive that money, whether it was a multi-state settlement, a settlement with just the state of Nevada, or frankly through a trial. If it's a multi-state settlement, often we have to play ball with the rest of the states who are settling. Many of those states have their own statutory requirements on how multi-state settlements or opioid settlements in particular are handled, and we would have to participate in those and meet the terms and conditions of that multi-state settlement. If it is a settlement with just the state of Nevada, we have a lot more leeway. So, for example, the T-Mobile settlement that was just with the state of Nevada, we were able to craft a settlement agreement that spoke to Nevada, kept Nevada jobs in Nevada, gave money to Nevada for sure, but also required T-Mobile to invest in all sorts of programs that were Nevada specific. So if we're able to engage in a settlement agreement with just Nevada, we would have a lot more leeway. If the funds are come through the result of a trial, there is no settlement agreement. So there is no court order that we would have, in terms of a settlement agreement, that we would have to abide by. However, a court or a jury might have restrictions upon that funding. So it really depends on how the funding would end up in the state. And of course, you're absolutely right. We want to ensure that this funding is used so we can save lives who might be lost to the opioid crisis. So we can fund law enforcement, public health, and educators, and all of those folks, the entire ecosystem of people who are affected by this crisis. And so we can also ensure that this doesn't happen again. So we're very much looking forward to working with the legislature, with the governor's office, with public health experts, et cetera, to ensure that funding, if and when we do get it, is used in the best way to serve the state.
Great, thank you for replying, and that's very encouraging, and thank you for what you're doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Dr. Titus. And, I think we, as the legislature, need to be careful about walking into some of these conversations a little bit too deeply. This really is the AG's world, and, it's, we work with him on it, but it's kind of it's a tough issue to work on, but we all know what our priorities for the state is. So we just hope that we get there, and that when the settlements do occur, that they get good work done in the state. So I appreciate everyone's questions and concerns about this. So are there any other questions from any other committee members at this time? I'm not sure if we addressed the spending of the balance of this account. Did that get answered amongst all this conversation and I missed it? I believe there'll be a remaining balance. So how will that be dealt with?
Thank you, Chair. Jessica Dare, for the record, that I believe will be carried forward for use in future biennia. Yes, I am correct that it will be carried forward.
Okay. So there was no time constraints on this particular one then, because we've sometimes heard there was a time constraint.
Not that thank you, Jessica Dare, for the record, not that I am aware of at this moment. Our plan was to carry that balance forward to continue funding that one position until we come to a better idea of how to more sustainably fund that position in the future. But that is our plan.
And I appreciate that. And I think this is like just a general holistic statement on the record. We know that funding positions with settlement money is a double-edged sword. It's nice to be able to start a program and have someone else fund it to see if it works for the state of Nevada. But then if it does work for us and it is actually helping people, we need to have the serious discussion about, does it need to be carried forward or not? So I know folks always have concerns about funding positions, and that's one of my concerns. But I also know when folks do take these jobs, they do know that it's tied to a certain funding stream, as if they had been working for a grant, and they know that there is a date involved. And we do get a lot of really good information and data to be able to look at what's going on in the state. So I appreciate all the work that the Attorney General's office has done on this. So committee members, are there any other particular questions on this budget account? Not hearing any, not seeing anyone wishing to be recognized. All right, well, thank you, ladies, very much for being here on a Friday morning. I think we did pretty good on time. We appreciate you, and you will be getting requests for information from us as we move forward. I look forward to the future conversations that we're going to have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So with that, committee members, that closes out our business for the day. We now need to go to public comment. It is 10:06 by my clock at this time. We'll give it till 10:08 2 minutes for folks to be able to call in, give them time to do it, especially since we're on a time delay. So we'll stand at ease for a couple of moments and then we'll go from there. Thank you all very much. All right, broadcast services, do we have anyone in the queue for public comment this morning?
Hello, Chair. This is Michael from Broadcast. The public comment line is open and working. However, we have no callers at this time.
All right. Thank you very much, Michael. We appreciate it. And thank you to you and all the folks in BPS that help us be successful with these meetings every day. So committee members, I think that concludes our work for today and for the week. Happy Lunar New Year to everyone and have a safe and happy Valentine's with those that you love. So with that, we are adjourned.